Game 7, Cavs overcome an 18-point deficit. They beat Orlando 106-94 to move on to the second round. They're going to play the Boston Celtics. Either way, it seems like one of those teams was going to be led to slaughter, right? But before we get there, and especially considering Fred covers the Knicks, Donovan Mitchell, if he had gone another year, the Cleveland Cavaliers had gone this entire experiment, right, with Donovan Mitchell and not having won a playoff series, that would have been a really bad look for everybody. But Donovan looked so invested. Like, for those who would have thought, man, Donovan can't wait to get out there, and maybe he can. But the fact that he showed up after not playing well early in this series, he showed up in Game 6. He really showed up in Game 7. All he needed was like a guy. Like, there was Karis LeVert. Darius Garland really showed up in the fourth quarter. Like, how did you see that Game 7 playing out? Did it go with the way that you expected it to? Because I expected Cleveland to win in 7.
Well, I thought Orlando was going to win going into the series. And I thought Orlando was going to take that Game 7. And when they were up 19 or whatever it was, I was sitting there being like, man, Cleveland, no Jared Allen. They're really going to come back from down 19. And they ended up doing it. I mean, I'm not surprised that Donovan Mitchell showed up. He always shows up. The dude has a track record of having some incredible playoff moments. And I know he's never made a super, super deep playoff run. And those Utah teams were kind of famous for not necessarily lasting as long as you wanted them to in the playoffs. But it wasn't necessarily because of Donovan Mitchell.
Right.
He had some incredible playoff runs with Utah during that time. And it's not surprising to see him this. He's notoriously, I can't speak from knowledge of covering him, knowing him. I don't really know him at all. I covered one time when he went to Brooklyn Cyclones game and took batting practice. And I watched him take batting practice. And I was blown away by how good Donovan Mitchell is at baseball. It's crazy. He's like, I knew he was a huge baseball fan because his dad worked for the Mets and he's notoriously a huge Mets fan and all of that. I did not know he's like unbelievable that he was like with a wood bat, just like blasting home runs in the Brooklyn Cyclones field. And I was like, damn, this guy's amazing.
He's a great athlete. He's like one of those dudes that's probably good at everything.
He is an incredible athlete. And I was not surprised to see him step up the way that he did. I think honestly, ultimately what the series came down to was the fact that Orlando doesn't really have the shooting or the playmaking. And they are going to have the roster flexibility to be able to go out and get it. I wasn't necessarily disappointed in Orlando for not having the playmaking or the shooting. We knew that coming in. This team is insanely young. I think it's really well coached. I think there were a few things that Jamal Mosley did, which I'm not going to say were bad coaching or anything like that, but I just think it was kind of first-time playoff coaching, and I bet you those things change because I think Jamal Mosley is crazy smart and a ridiculously awesome coach. Like, for example, fourth quarter of an elimination game where you're losing, he had an all-bench lineup in for 2 minutes at the start of that quarter, and he deviated from it pretty quick, but I was surprised. Maybe I've been covering Tibbs too long, and I live in a world where Josh Hart just doesn't sub out.
Bench? What bench? What's that? That's Tibbs' word. We got a bench?
Where somebody asked Tibbs, did you consider subbing out Josh Hart in the second half? And Tibbs, knowing it was funny, but genuinely said, Josh Hart is never subbing out. I had a passing thought, but I let it pass.
Tibbs plays the hits, man. He knows what he's doing out there.
He knows exactly what he's doing.
He is totally aware of what the
100%.
media is saying about him. No, and to your point about Jamal Mosley, you're right. I think, he was on my Coach of the Year ballot. And I felt pretty good about him being there because I didn't know what to expect from Orlando. Like, every year there's a team that we go into the season saying, oh, this team is going to be better than you think. But that's because we think we're smart. You know what I mean? Like, we think we're going to be like the first ones on the train to say, all right, guys, remember, I'm the first one to tell you this. The fact that he's gotten Paolo Banchero, who I think is a really good player, but I feel like given where Orlando is, I feel like you've kind of gotten the most out of that given that roster. Like, I feel like he has some flaws in his game that maybe he's going to grow out of, that maybe a real point guard is going like to help him, as far as like facilitating offense for him. But I feel like, man, short of that second half where Orlando just kept getting blitzed, You know what I mean? They just kept getting blitzed, and he couldn't find a way out of it. He kept trying to shoot his way out of it. And I was maybe like 11 to 28 or something like that. You know what I mean? But other than that, I felt like I was really impressed with Mosley. I was really impressed with Paulo Banchero because at least he don't scare. You know what I mean?
No, he doesn't. And the thing with Banchero throughout the series, I think there were definitely turnover issues. He had the 9 turnovers in game 1. And again, that's something that happens if you just get like a competent guy who can start off your offense. I think some of those get shaved off. Franz Wagner was just
not good.
I love watching Franz Wagner play basketball. I think he's really good. He was really good in game 6. He had some really nice moments in this series, but 1 for 15 in a game 7. That is not going to cut it. And you look at the guys who took the 3 most shots for them, and Banchero shoots 10 for 28, and Suggs shoots 2 for 13. And I don't think Suggs was 100% in this series. And Wagner shoots 1 for 15. And you're not going to win a competitive game 7 if your top 3 shooters in terms of volume are putting up those percentages. It's just going to be really, really hard. And I thought Banchero played well, by the way, because he got to the line a ton. But he got to the line 16 times. He got to the line a ton, and he was ferocious on the boards. But look, this team has while I thought they were going to beat Cleveland, the expectation on this team should not be you have to beat Cleveland for it to be a successful season.
Right.
For Cleveland, they had to beat Orlando for it to be a successful season. You can't tank into a first-round matchup and then lose that first-round matchup. They had to beat Orlando for it to be a successful season. Orlando,
now remember, I was going to say, remember that. That's just as a point of housekeeping. They literally said, we want the Orlando Magic in this. Remember the wild, wacky last game of the regular season? That seems like 2 months ago because of everything that's happened since playing and all the other stuff. But Cleveland said, we don't want to play. We don't want to play Indiana. We don't want to play Milwaukee. We want this team. If you do that, you better win. Otherwise, somebody's going to get fired. And I don't think it's just going to be roster changes. It was going to be somebody's going to lose their job.
100%. And they did it.